Okay, welcome everybody. This is April 28th, 2020. My name is Kevin Frank with an MSU Turf Team update. Today we have Dr. Jeff Andresen, state climatologist from MSU, and he's going to provide us with a weather forecast. So Jeff, welcome, and go ahead and take it away.
Well, thanks, Kevin. And I'll bring up my lead image here, and it's another weather map, but it is the old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think one of the long and the shorts of our looking ahead here, we're stuck in a similar jet stream pattern. There aren't going to be too many changes, although in the short term, we are going to see a very active weather pattern here for the next couple days. I'll talk more about that in a second. But looking further ahead as to when is this cooler than normal pattern going to break, I think the answer is, well, not soon. We probably added another week, and I know we said this last week at the briefing, but it has some staying power, and what you're looking at here essentially is a forecast jet stream flow way out to the 9th of May into the beginning of that second week of May, and you can see the big troughing feature carved out over the Great Lakes and New England. So high likelihood of continued below normal temperatures. I think that's one of the major take homes with the forecast, and I'll get to that in just a second. Looking backwards at the last week, again, unseasonably cool temperatures, that goes without saying. The mean temperature departures for the past week here generally between 8 to as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. Many areas had a hard freeze overnight last Thursday. We talked about that. Some spots made it all the way down into the teens again, and almost near record-breaking type low temperatures. Most areas in the state turned out primarily in the low and mid-20s, but still far below normal, and certainly for that date. Depending on where you were in terms of precipitation, it ranged from another drier than normal week. That was especially true across far northern parts of the state, and also parts of the Saginaw Valley into the thumb, were less than a quarter of an inch for the entire week. There were some spots, notably here across the southern quarter or so of lower Michigan, that picked up, in some cases, more than an inch of precipitation, and a few spots up in the northern lower that also got up around 3/4 to an inch. One of the interesting trends, and we'll look at this at some point, though, it has, after a very wet early part of the winter, it has trended drier than normal in many sections of the state. And for the last 30 days, we were generally running somewhere on the order of 60 to 70% of normal. But again, given how much water was in the landscape prior to that, it isn't an issue. We'd like to see actually some a little drier soils to work on and get out at this time of the year. And that's generally been the case. But once you hear the outlook, there are some changes coming. Last review map here, or image, and that's our degree day totals beginning the 1st of March. And not a surprise, we're looking at significant deficits of heat accumulation this year. That, again, given the air temperatures, that goes without saying. But now virtually all of the state well behind where they typically are at this time of the year, generally 1 to 2 weeks or even more now than 2 calendar weeks behind normal, and especially across northern parts of the state. So our degree day accumulations, and of course our phenology, is lagging considerably behind where it typically is this time of the year. And it seems that a lot of our vegetation is sort of in suspended animation here as we go through these cooler than normal weeks, and more of the same likely to come here. But we certainly have extended blooms for some flowers, that type of thing, that we don't see in some years. Well, looking at the forecast and looking at where we are here this morning, a fairly complex weather map, and I've got a lot on this particular image, but there's a stationary front. This went through as a frontal boundary here last night and set off last evening's shower activity. This particular frontal system is hooked up to or associated with an area of low pressure out over, you can see Sioux Falls area in South Dakota. And the bottom line is that due to a strong upper air disturbance that's moving from northwest to southeast across the region here over the next couple of days, this low pressure is going to intensify rapidly, and it's going to move right right towards Michigan and actually right through the state here over the next 48 hours and set the stage for a very, very active, a very wet weather pattern. We're going to have wind associated with this once again, and probably some of the most significant rainfall or precipitation, I probably should say here, that we've observed in several weeks. On the lower left here, we have a radar time lapse looking at, this would be the midday hours. You can see the leading edge of the first batch of precipitation approaching Michigan, way out here over western Wisconsin. That will make its way eastward towards Michigan and impact most areas other than the UP, which we'll see precip this afternoon. Probably early evening hours, we'll see the western lower peninsula impacted by this, and then spread from west to east overnight for the rest of the state. It will be, in many areas, it will be a fairly significant rain, at least a half an inch. Some spots across the central lower tonight may see as much as an inch. I would also not be surprised, given the dynamics with this system, that we could see some thunderstorms develop, again, primarily for the southern half of the state. At this point in time, it looks like the garden variety type of thunderstorms, but somewhere in the Midwest, probably to our south, closer to the Ohio Valley and towards the mid-Mississippi Valley, there probably will be severe weather with this particular system. I just don't think it'll make it this far north. But this is again, the leading edge of what is expected to be probably about a 2 to 2.5 day precipitation event. By tomorrow morning, you can see the area of low pressure. This is at 8 o'clock, consolidates right over the southern tip of Lake Michigan. You can see a warm front extending north and east out of the system up into the central lower. All of this means added lift. You can see the dark greens here are precip or rain in this case, likely to occur. And so I think we're going to see two primary batches of precip with this weather system, which is a long-lasting event later on tonight, overnight tonight, and then later during the day tomorrow, depending on where you are. But there'll be two major, I think, periods of precipitation. And then finally, when we move to Thursday morning, you can see it doesn't make much progress, only up to the tip of the thumb here in the central part of the state. So very slow moving. We will see wraparound precipitation that will gradually end during the day or late in the day, Thursday, from south to north. I would also mention, because of being north of this particular center of this circulation of this low pressure system, northern parts of the state, tomorrow is going to be a miserable day, probably with highs only in the 40s, lots of wind and lots of rain with it. So just a wet, cold, very, very inclement for this time of the year. And once again, before all said and done here, early Friday when the rain ends, we're probably looking at 1 to 2 inches of rain or precipitation across most of the state. The exception would be in the far northern part of the state, the central and western upper peninsula, where precip totals, these are weekly totals, but much of this, the vast majority of this precipitation you're looking at here forecast for the next week, falls over the next 48 to 60 hours. Friday will be dry across the state. And then as we move into the weekend, we will see some scattered showers, but the vast majority of the state will remain dry. It'll be a hit and miss. No significant precipitation. Probably not expected for the rest of the weekend, well into next week as well. Temperature-wise, we will see temperatures recover a little bit towards the weekend. They'll be generally in the 40s and 50s for the next couple of days with the precipitation. They'll recover into the 50s to low 60s here over the weekend, but still remain a few degrees below the normal. Low temperatures generally from the upper 30s north into the low and mid 40s in the south. Again, still a little bit below normal. One other thing to note about this, even though we are still in a cooler than normal pattern, it's unlikely right now. Don't see any hard freezes or widespread severe freezing events similar to what we saw the last couple of weeks. So that's one change, even though we are, again, still stuck in the same general pattern. But looking further ahead in the medium range, this is where we started when we looked at our lead image here. Forecast jet stream pattern, and the 8 to 14 day and 6 to 10 day timeframes are very, very similar. You can see this same split flow jet stream pattern across North America, with the ridging out over Western Canada, and then the trough over the central and eastern part, and that northwesterly flow there is why we have the below normal temperatures. And you can see the forecast in the upper right here for mean temperatures. Not a surprise at all. Very similar to where we've been for much of the last 3, even 4 weeks now. And a little bit of a change from what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. This outlook is also calling for near to below normal precipitation totals. And that's typically what we see this time of the year with this kind of a pattern. So cooler and drier than normal. So again, back to the question, how long does this pattern persist? Well, at least another week. And it could go longer, but it's unusual during a transition season like spring for any jet stream pattern to last too long. But we've seen this one now a good 3 and even pushing 4 weeks before us. That's not very common. So wrapping up here, summarizing here, a very active weather pattern for the short term over the next couple days with lots of rain and maybe some cases as much as 2 inches across portions of the state. We will see finally the rain come to an end on the day Thursday into Thursday evening, and then a dry day on Friday, and mostly dry in most areas of the state. There will be some scattered showers over the weekend, but many areas will remain dry and a little bit milder. We will see high temperatures back up into the 50s, probably low 60s here over the weekend. As we mentioned before, looking out in the medium range, the forecast guides really consistently calling for a general continuation of the pattern that we've been in with below normal mean temperatures and probably now near to below normal precipitation totals. So the cooler and drier scenario is what we're stuck in here for a while. If you remember last week, we talked about the official outlook for May, calling for, well, the no direction, but our summer outlook still was in the warmer and wetter direction. So there's going to have to be a significant significant jet stream pattern. I still think that will come, but it's just further out or further ahead than we would have guessed here earlier. And I think that's all I've got. So I'll wrap it up and hand it back to you, Kevin. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. If you just want to, there we go. Continuing to mention, it's cooler and drier than normal. Sounds like at least temporarily, some of this rainfall might be a good thing for our turf industry, especially those lawn care professionals that have been out since they were able to get back to work last Friday, getting some pre-emergence herbicide applications, get those watered in a little bit. And even from the standpoint of golf courses, with reduced staff that might not have their irrigation systems fully charged, it has been getting a little dry. So I think it's kind of a good and bad, so to speak, but there's nothing we can do about it. And just want to thank you again for being with us today and giving us a weather update. So thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure.